Hey guys, so I'm going to do a quick review on question 3 on the multiple choice part 1 because I have a lot of people asking questions, and really honestly this is a pretty tough question and there's a lot of moving parts to it. So let's go ahead and start discussing it. So here is what the question is asking. It wants to know what is the equilibrium constant. So first of all, we have to know what equilibrium constant is. Equilibrium constant is your big K. And so if we want to know what this is, we have to understand how it relates to the Nernst equation. So they gave me the Nernst equation here. And you know how normally it would be log of Q, right? And Q is my product over my reactants. Well, big K here will take the place of Q, all right? So your rules for this question is that Q turns into K. So I'm basically solving for Q, which in this case is K. Also, because I have done this, because I've stated something about equilibrium, remember at equilibrium you have an E cell value that is equal to 0. You have a dead battery. So your E cell that you see right here is 0 volts. So that is true if we are solving for equilibrium constant. Those are just two things that we have to know. Well, now that we know Q turns into K and that our E cell value is 0 volts, we now can start working on plugging in the information to the Nernst equation and solving for K. Now, we've taken care of this. We know that that's 0 volts, but we don't know our standard E cell potential. But they did give us the entire reaction and they gave us our half reactions so we can figure out what the standard E cell would be. So E cell is equal to reduced minus oxidized. We have to figure out which one of these is reduced and which one of these is oxidized. So iron is oxidized here because it goes up in charge, and nickel is reduced because it goes down in the charge. So now that we've established who does what, we can plug this in to our E cell equation. So it will be negative 0.23 volts minus negative 0.44 volts. Now remember, you're not allowed to use a calculator on this one. You do have to work the mental math. So this is essentially saying 0.23 negative plus 0.44. So when you do that math mentally, you get a positive 0.21 volts. And so this is your standard E cell. So we know what this value will be here. So now what we're going to do is plug in everything we know into the Nernst equation. And so we know that the E cell is equal to 0. Our standard E cell is equal to 0.21. And I'm going to do some condensing here. So to make my mental math easier, I'm just going to call 0.059 0.06. And 0.06 divided by 2 is equal to 0.03. Remember, this negative sign is right there because it's subtracting. So it's minus 0.03, all right? And all I did was condense that to make my mental math easier. And now we have log. Remember, instead of using this expression, which is Q, we just call that K. Now that we have our equation set up, we're just working algebraically to solve for K, because that is what the equilibrium constant is. So the very first thing I have to do is subtract the 0.21 because it's put together here by multiplication and subtraction. I'm sorry, not multiplication, that was wrong. Addition and subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 0.21 on both sides. And that gives me negative 0.21 equals negative 0.03 times the log of K. Now you see how these are multiplied together, so I'm going to divide by negative 0.03 on both sides. and that is equal to 7. Now remember, we have to do the mental math. The negatives cancel out. We're essentially saying what is 21 divided by 3, and that's why we're getting 7 here. There's no decimals involved or anything like that because these decimals end up canceling each other out. So 7 is equal to log of K. Now, a lot of you juniors were in quarantine and all of that stuff. That's when school got canceled last year, so you don't really know much about the log functions yet. But what you should know is that log is 10 based. And so if I want to get rid of log, this is what I do, because I want to get K by itself. Log is 10 based, so I turn log into 10, and then this is how I learned it. You fish hook whatever answer is right here. And so what that means, and it's called fish hook because that looks like a fish hook, that means that I'm going to raise 10 to whatever the power that this answer is right here. So my answer is 10 raised to the 7th is equal to K. So I am essentially looking for an answer that is closest to 1 times 10 to the positive 7th. And so if I look at these exponents here, that's 10 raised to the 22, 10 raised to the 7, 10 raised to the 3, 10 raised to the negative 8, and 10 raised to the negative 23. This D is the closest answer that I have here. And so if you are really confused by this question, don't stress out over it. They will never ask this type of question in free response. And if they do ask it in multiple choice, it will be very similar to this process. And just know that if I'm looking for equilibrium constant, Q is now K and the E cell is 0. And then I solve and try to get K by itself. So I hope this was helpful. See you later. I gotta go turn off my thing.